We're never gonna get the lighting just, bro. We need to take a picture of like where everything is set up, so like we can kind of remember what.
Okay, you gotta
Uh,
get higher and I gotta get lower. Yep.
I swear, one day. And we're back.
And we're back. All right. So today we're talking about Andor,
Yeah.
season two, episodes 4, 5, and 6.
hmm
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, we're digging it, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh
we're
no, digging. This is like digging all the way through the core.
yeah,
This.
of Gorman.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot to touch on, a lot to touch
Yeah.
on, both on, the wonders of this world that they're painting, wonders of the science fiction mixed with fantasy ideas that is Star Wars, and current politics, and also past. For example,
Yeah.
Gormand. The language of the Gormand is almost like French mixed in with something else.
It's interesting. I wonder whether it's I mean, it must I don't know, it must be a made up language,
Yeah,
but
obviously, but
but
it,
at the
it's
same time it could be like, there's a lot of languages or like lost languages or small languages,
mhm.
French languages around like different regions of France,
Yeah.
So I wonder if it
So it's
it
like some sort of like bastardized version or like or
or
Star Wars
it
or
could, I
even
mean, it could literally be a language that's spoken by a small number of people,
right.
right?
Like
But there, it does seem there are French aspects
oh
to
yeah,
it,
no, and which also
So
really mixed well with Gormand in
yeah,
itself.
yeah,
Like Gormand is a supposedly aloof planet,
yeah.
where its one export is spider silk, which God, the spiders, there's so many of them in this series, and as someone who isn't really that big of a fan of spiders, it's getting to me. Um, but yeah, no, it feels almost like this world is like 1940s France trying to fight off like the Germans,
Right,
which
right. The for so first off, um, I know you want to talk a bit about how, there's an aspect of Andor that seems,
relevant.
relevant to today to some people in terms of, global conflict and politics and
Mhm.
rising, fascism to say, explicitly. But there's always been basically like for the empire in certain scenes and things, um, Nazi Germany basically has always, mid-century,
Right.
early 20th century fascism is an easy thing to like,
Add to
well,
this.
it's an easy like genre or trope or mood or whatever it is
Right.
to say, okay, this is what's happening, organized conquest and evil and in a mechanical modern sense or whatever.
Mm.
Um, but and so there's definitely an aspect, to your point, where the rebels on Gorman are speaking French. It does seem like the French resistance
Mhm.
sort of component to it. I also want to talk about these three episodes, which were released as a kind of
A
a,
try,
a
like
trio or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
right? And we from the first three where we leave the planet, they're in the rural side of things and whatnot, and now we're kind of getting more to like it starts with like the wedding in a city. They're dealing with communication stuff,
Right.
and the way this trio ends is like so much more intense, dark kind. You know what I mean? Like we go
Depressing.
well, and we go from like the fields and the country and the that
Yeah.
sort of thing to like
Uh,
we're back into the city or urban,
yeah, yeah.
cities and urban and
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 then
and
we're into
stuff.
the like jungles and stuff. But this
Right.
episode, it's interesting. Like,
That's true. The first one starts with their battling, right? Like, or is that
right.
the end of the last one? I've forgotten
The
now.
end of the last one has a fight. The beginning
Right.
of the first has an escape.
Right. right. They escape and
Yeah, and then
yeah.
like at the end of that episode, the Star Wars version of rock paper scissors.
Oh my God. Ah, yeah, that
It's
was
like
it's interesting because there's been a lot of that too. I think we touched on it in the last time is that um there's like a, they take us to another world,
Mhm.
right? But there's been a lot of references in this world to things that are similar to us, to almost
Right.
like to
It's more, yeah,
humanize, right?
it's no longer space wizards and re plucky rebel kids fighting mean evil fascists, space fascists. It's humans fighting humans, all for different goals and, beliefs and purposes.
But I mean also just the culture, like you can watch Star Wars certain movies or whatever where it's like okay, they're in this world and you're watching and
Mhm.
it's like, here are the characters and here's the things happening and you don't really get time to say like where do they buy their lunch? You know what I
Right. Yeah.
mean?
Like
Where and so in and that's fine because you're too busy like blowing
oohing
things
and
up and
ahhing of
fighting
like,
and
yeah,
they're on
like
the planet and whatever it is, right? Of this crazy, in the early days of these movies, it'd be like they'd create these literally physically create these worlds, right? And in
mhm.
a way that we'd never seen the effects and stuff.
Right.
And so, but here there's a lot, there's cultural things and sometimes for me can get close to like breaking
The
the
four.
fourth wall or
Mhm.
whatever when they're like and it's risky when they do something like rock paper scissors or whatever, but at the same time it's a
Yeah,
good laugh, right?
like those kind of moments you can feel like rocking boat. You could really fail and like break the immersion,
Right.
or you could like get that 1 in a million and actually make it work. And then it's really crazy. Like, wow, that actually is kind of funny to think that like
Yeah.
this stuff. But yeah, to your point, yeah, when you think of movies, you don't often, or like these kind of movies at least,
Yeah.
you don't too often think about this is a world where people live in.
They
You
have
don't,
to they have to do, you
yeah,
can have
they,
you can have your military, you can have your armies and these kinds of things, but there's still that somebody's got to like peel the potatoes or whatever, right?
yeah,
It might be a robot, but
yeah, you need to, you can make this brutalist architecture where all the bad guys are living in and fighting, but you also have to have beds somewhere. You also have to
right.
have a
Yep.
bathroom.
Yep. Yep.
And you don't think too much of that in Star Wars. You don't think about it. You think
Well,
from
you're
like
so caught
one,
up in
yeah,
the story kind
you're
of and
thinking from like, oh, character A has to go through to B to C and then D at the end. But you don't think like, okay, after D, what do the characters do?
right.
Like, what are they like? You've defeated the, fascists. Now, are you gonna fix the tax codes?
Right. Yeah. And that's a lot of what
Right.
kind of anyways,
This is
there's
what Andor feels like. It's like the human, the actual human side of Star Wars. The
well, and also and I think we touched on this before, it's also the administrate like in order to have, an empire, you got to
right.
have administration of the
Yeah,
empire, right? And
you
so there's a lot
right.
of the we're seeing that in different parts of the storyline, right? Like there's very
Right.
definitely, the characters who are chasing Andor who get assigned to Gorman, the mid-level kind of Empire people trying to
Right.
rise up the Empire ranks and manage things and
Right.
all that stuff. And you see that a
Yeah.
bit,
And then you've got those at the head who see everything, from the top of the mountain and think in grander scale. Like the season I think Andor season one ended with that insane shot of the Death Star's eye
Right,
being built, which
right.
was just like you could put it on like on a cover of a band or like a vinyl disc. That is how
Hmm.
metal it was.
Yeah.
Like, and this is what they're trying to mine out of Gorman probably. Like the Emperor wants
The
that
energy.
energy
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
and
to build.
that's not for like, oh, I want to give a few planets some better energy reserves. No, this is all strategic to build
Right.
a Death Star, or
Right.
two actually.
And so, it's been a while. Like, well, first off, I think I don't know if we've touched on this or not. I can't remember if this was in the first three or not, but the what is it? BBY or
Oh
whatever?
yeah, yeah, we're now in three
Three
BBY.
BBY.
We've
And
jumped a
so,
whole
right,
year.
yeah, that's right. So this segment, this trio starts off at three BBY, and again, like it's crazy that we're like funneling into Rogue One and into the real Star Wars, right?
Yeah, like the
And there's
original.
and there's so much like depth and so much background to what's going on, right? The original Star Wars, you see Leia and R2, right? And that's kind of all you know about this whole
Right,
background. Later, you might hear some things and probably, if you're a 10-year-old kid, you would have forgotten
right.
what you were listening to. But it's so amazing that we're getting such a rich buildup and you know
Mhm.
where this is heading, right?
Yeah,
That's the other thing is that we're watching. I think maybe that's why it feels for people who are concerned about world politics right now
right.
that when you see this like build up, you know where it's going, right? That they're basically starting to tear down the republic,
The
the Senate, the political structure, and you see where this is going,
right.
right?
Yeah, like
And
while we were watching the final episode, I had to pause and like physically write it down so I could remember the fact that yes, this is literally like the I know it's cheesy to say or maybe not, but like this is literally the beginning of the original trilogy. This is
right,
where like Tarkin comes in and says, "Don't worry about the Senate. We just destroyed it. Like it's
right,
just been the final order of the Senate, to destroy the Senate." Like
right,
this is building up to that. This
right.
is
And it's so like, I mean, when Rogue One came out, I loved it, because it was like it was this, right? It was the before, it was the lead up. But it's so great that, they did Rogue One kind of before we had Netflix and the
yeah,
and and the and the and the modern television where you could do an eight or
eight.
10 part season, multiple ones to get into these kinds of detail, right?
Right,
Like Andor is like the dream that you would have, or
right.
anyways, it's just amazing. There's so much rich stuff as we
Yeah,
head
like
towards
the
this,
it's crazy to think that like this show is building up to the original like
right,
all the things, all the throwaway lines in the original Star Wars movies about that like kind of added an unspoken depth to the world like when Luke says to Obi-Wan, you fought in the Clone Wars?
right.
Like
That's like the only
yeah,
mention or
yeah, that's the
whatever.
only
Yeah,
mention. Like, like, oh, a
yeah.
past war. But now, like, to
We
me,
got
at the very least,
yeah,
you know a bit, but like, to me,
yeah,
like, oh yeah, he fought in the Clone Wars, the war that saw, countless worlds, with clones versus separatist robots, where he watched all of his friends die.
right.
Oh yeah, that one throwaway line became the
Multiple movies and series, and
yeah,
and they
that
got
that
to
fleshed
explore.
out
Yeah, yeah,
every like
yeah,
not just like
yeah.
that one idea, but all the new ideas that they could make
Right.
with it. Like this is
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And
another thing to look at is
right,
all the different plots, and specifically the party plot line.
right.
Like
Yeah,
we saw Leia's father in that, like the
right. Yeah,
ruler
yeah.
of was it Alderaan?
Alderaan. Yeah,
Alderaan, yeah, like.
yeah.
His planet, in 3 years, explodes.
Right,
Tarkin single-handedly ends homelessness and unemployment instantly with one death laser.
right,
Like this is building up to
right.
that
No, it's in
ultimate
and
war
that's
crime.
yeah, that and it's interesting. Yeah, you see that. Yeah, there's so much. There's It's not that the first couple of the first three episodes took a while to 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 get into or whatever,
Mhm.
but they're laying the groundwork, right, for so many different plot lines that are
Yeah.
clearly happening
Yeah.
and intersecting. But so the other one thing I did want to mention that we've both really noticed in this, and again, maybe we mentioned in our last episode, but is the technology, the retro technology, like the
Mm.
retro future technology. But the fact is that like we're going into the very first movie, right?
Yeah.
And so they like even though like we have droids and drones and whatnot today,
Right.
and if we were to imagine, because now it's 50 years later, right? If we were to imagine the future, we've got 50 years of
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
tech to let us see even further, but
Do that.
they can't do that. They're trying to keep the tech kind of similar, you know?
Those movies kind of bottleneck all the wonders of
Right,
the prequel stuff
right.
because like all of like they have to basically go, I want to add all this cool tech, and like the people have to go, yeah, do that as long as it fits in this area. Like you
Yeah,
can't make it like 100 different screens of
right,
100 different doodads.
right.
No, you've got to have
Yeah,
like you've got
yeah,
to have a pull-out frame with 45 buttons that
yeah,
do who knows
yeah.
what, and like
Well, but it also kind of blends in, all that tech kind of blends into the
right.
the 1930s parallel between this and the rise of Nazi Germany or
Mm,
whatever, even to the point, and I've got my trusty little guide here on who's
who's who?
who. I think it's Clea Markey, who's I think that's her, who's the assistant to
Luther.
Luthen,
Luthen? Oh, Luthen.
and she's got this really, 1940s kind of hairstyle, right? Which is
Right.
very, reminiscent of Second World War, and also a little bit reminiscent of Blade Runner, the
Mm.
replicant
Yeah.
in Blade
Like
Runner.
like that whole party was basically like nine almost like okay, I haven't seen too much. Well, I have seen, but like 1940s, 30s, like parties. Like Mon Mothma comes in like this flowing dress that looks
Right.
like it was
Although
pulled.
although all the dancing and everything is very much, techno
Yeah,
kind of
like
today, right? Like, and
it's
drug induced, like they
yeah,
had their
yeah.
whole drug kind of stuff, which was interesting. We haven't really seen too much of that in Star Wars, people
Mhm.
taking drugs, like non-alcohol kind of
Yeah, like he wasn't just talking about
recreational or
Star
whatever.
Wars. It's called spiced, to
Oh
like go
yeah.
past, like
Which is weird because there are people who do say that Star Wars is kind of like a ripoff of Dune, right? Like there's
right.
a lot of things which
Yeah,
has spice in it
yeah.
as well.
Like everything kind of rips off a bit of
No, I
everything.
know.
Yeah,
I
but
know.
yeah, like that. No, definitely. Like,
Yeah.
but it's just yeah, it's funny to like like oh, do you do meth? Whoa, man, no, I don't do meth.
Yeah.
I do criss crawl or something. I do
Yeah.
spices,
Right.
spices.
Right.
Or do you want a death stick or something? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
And also there's Andor and Blix, right? That whole kind of interaction, that whole part of this timeline is
right.
really, that's where it starts off, right? Like a year later, they're living in
Coruscant? Yeah,
Coruscant
Coruscant.
and hating it, and kind of this city, the depression. She's in a
Hmm.
depression, and they're trapped and oppressive
Yeah.
and
They're
whatever.
they're they're hiding in plain
Hiding.
sight basically because
Right.
like,
It's in a big
you would
city.
never expect the spy you're hunting for, is being hunted by everyone to be living in the capital, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And then like but yeah, like
But
the
then
depressions, like like at some point, we it isn't talked too much about like Andor killed a young Imperial because like,
right.
they discovered who they were. At the end of the
She's a bit freaked out by that. She's
yeah.
haunted by that a little
Yeah,
bit, right?
though she does get some retribution at the end where she
Right.
finds the person who tortured her,
Right.
to
Well,
which
no,
is the
that's that I mean
cool
that and I think that's the that's why these kind of three episodes fit together because that's like the end of a movie or something, right?
Yeah,
Where
like
somebody like
literally,
gets that
and it
person
was the coolest.
and also like the intensity of it,
Right.
like the whatever, like
It to me, that was the that was the most badass
yeah,
scene
it
in
was
the three
very
episodes.
it's
She
very badass. It's in fact it's one of the most badass things in any Star
yeah,
Wars,
like
right? Like for
she
a good guy.
yeah, she finds her torturer.
Yeah.
She figures out a way that he ends up in his torture area, puts him in his chair, doesn't
Yeah.
take his cake, and then puts on this. I don't know if she even said a word to him, and
Yeah.
like, or maybe she did, but only like a few cool
Puts
lines.
on the thing
Puts
that
on the headset.
yeah.
We don't hear what he's going through, but then she walks out. She this guy comes like, "Hey, who are you? You're not supposed to be here." She doesn't say a word. She doesn't react. She just
Yeah.
pulls a
Blast
gun,
him.
shoots him, doesn't say a thing. She keeps on walking. She meets up with Andor, and then he hands her a like explosive, and she blows the whole thing up.
Right.
She doesn't say
But
a
it but
damn thing. She
right.
walks out like a badass.
Yeah, but it's interesting because meanwhile the sort of rebels or whatever it is, right? The resistance or
Yeah.
whatever
Oh
it is
God.
on Gorman are doing their little kind of resistance thing
Mhm.
that
Controlled
yeah,
resistance by the.
controlled resistance, exactly. And there's multiple layers of empire,
Mhm.
happening, right? There's that whole relationship where like he thinks he's working for the empire and really she's like one level above because she
Right.
knows the real story and stuff.
Mhm.
But so that whole sort of thing's going on, and Andor's like, this like
Not for me.
not for me, not it's not gonna whatever. But also this is less about like fighting the resistance and this is more about giving peace to his partner, right? To the
Right.
person that he loves, like, okay, let's go do this. This is,
This is gonna help you a
yeah,
bit.
this is going to help you and we'll just get it done and this
Yeah.
person deserves it
Yeah,
and
yeah,
whatever,
definitely. Like,
So,
but and it's interesting to think that like due to these actions, he both reunited a couple and maybe got them killed. I'm not gonna say it's his
into
fault. It
in
not at all,
terms of
but
what do you
so in the at the final episode, there are these two people who are definitely you know, like I
oh,
love you, but we can't.
right,
The only reason we're not together is because of
right,
this. We've got
right,
to
right. Yeah.
work on these different sides,
Yeah, and
and,
she gets killed. Yeah.
not just like by like like a worthy sacrifice fighting off like 100 stormtroopers sank. Like the plan was that like she and her like ally are the only ones armed, the only ones who have the guns to
Right.
like make sure nothing
Yeah.
bad happens. They bring the guns, but then one guy doesn't listen to those rules, even though he
Yeah.
was like singled out,
The local guy who's
and
gonna
like
cause trouble for sure.
and then a struggle happens and she gets shot,
Yeah.
and then there's just like complete silence while the guy cries, and then she goes, "Stop crying, you idiot. Her death is gonna haunt you forever. She was like the bravest person ever. She died for a worm like you, and like she just worthily lays into this guy who didn't
Hmm.
follow the mission, and like
Yeah.
she just lost her partner, but like she didn't kill him or anything. She lets him know why he's an idiot, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I knew that when the round went off, I knew who it hit, and I was heartbroken because like,
Yeah.
why did they have to kill the happy
Yeah.
couple?
I knew something bad was gonna happen, but I didn't know what it was. But so then but anyways, there's so many different like stories happening, right? Like
Hmm.
all of the different like the senator and the art dealer and the now we've got these different resistance things going on and the different layers of the empire
Hmm.
and so much going on. But well, I think we should wrap it up and let's get on to episodes 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, I'm very excited for these. Like I can't wait for how they're just gonna absolutely flip the script on us again. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's good stuff.
We're gonna be looking out for any upcoming projects. Tales of the Underworld. I'm really excited to talk about when we get a chance.
Right. I just saw something called Murderbot, which looks kind of interesting.
Murderbot, interesting.
Yeah. And
But yeah, until meet again.
until we see you again,
Take care out there,
take
folks.
care.